Rebo says hello. She's sitting on a book I'm going to read to you today.
Hello Summit family. I'm going to be reading to you today a book called Maxie. It is a book from my childhood. It's written by Mildred Katrowitz and it's illustrated by Emily A. McCulley. This book was written in 1970 and published by Parents Magazine Press, where my grandmother, Patricia Ayers, was an editor. So it was a gift to me 50 years ago, and it's one that I hope will remind you of the many ways our lives are interconnected, even when we aren't aware of those connections. Maxie. By Mildred Katrowitz, pictures by Emily A. McCulley, published by Parents Magazine Press, New York. To my mother, who was necessary to begin with. Maxie lived in 3 small rooms on the top floor of an old brownstone house on Orange Street. She had lived there for many years, and every day was the same for Maxie. Every morning, 7 days a week, every morning at exactly 7 o'clock, Maxie raised the shades on her 3 front windows. Every morning at exactly 7:10, Maxie's large orange cat jumped up onto the middle windowsill and sprawled there in the morning sun. At 7:20, if you were watching Maxie's back window, you could see her raise the shade to the very top. Then she uncovered a bird cage. On the perch inside the cage was a yellow canary. He was waiting for his water dish to be filled, and it always was if you were still watching at 7:22. At 8:15 every morning, Maxie's door opened with a tired squeak. Maxie's old leather slippers made slapping sounds as she walked down the 4 flights of uncarpeted stairs to the front door. Outside the front door were the bottles of milk in a container. Maxie always tried to hold the door open with her left foot while she reached out to get her milk, but every morning it was just a little too far for her to reach. The door always banged shut and locked behind her. So at 8:20 every morning, Maxie rang the bell marked superintendent. The superintendent, whose name was Arthur, would open the door for Maxie and let her in with her milk. Only Maxie and the man at the grocery store knew what she ate for breakfast, but everyone knew she drank tea. At 8:45 every morning, they could hear the whistling of her tea kettle. How Maxie loved that whistle. She loved it so much that she let it sing out for 1 full minute. Dogs howled, cats whined, and babies bawled, but everyone knew that when the whistle stopped, it would be 8:46, and it always was. The mailman knew more about Maxie than anyone else did. He knew that she had a sister in Chicago who sent her a Christmas card every year. He also knew when Maxie planted the flowers in her window boxes, because every spring he delivered her seed catalog. Then a few weeks later, he delivered packets of seeds. Every morning at 9 o'clock, Maxie walked down the stairs for the second time in her leather slippers. She went outside and put her small bag of garbage in the pail on the front stoop. Then she came back in and waited for the mailman. She walked slowly past him in the hall, watching him put mail in the slots for the other people who lived in the house. Then she climbed the 4 flights of stairs again, resting at each landing. When she got to the top, Maxie went into her apartment, and the door closed after her with the same tired squeak. One afternoon at 1:05, just as she did every afternoon at 1:05, just as she did every afternoon at 1:05, Maxie moved the bird cage with the yellow bird in it to the front windows. It was shady and cool there now. The large orange cat moved to the back window and sprawled there, soaking up the sun that matched the color of his fur. "You're perfectly happy just lying there day after day," Maxie said to the cat. "All you ever want to do is move from one windowsill to the other and watch the world go by. You don't need anyone, and no one really needs you. But you don't seem to care." Maxie turned away from the window. "I care," she said sadly. "I'm not a cat, but I might as well be." Maxie felt very tired, and she went to bed. That was Monday. On Tuesday morning at 7 o'clock, the 3 shades on Maxie's front windows and the one on her back window remained down. At 7:10, the large orange cat was still asleep at the foot of Maxie's bed, and at 7:30, there were no sweet warbling sounds. That morning, no one heard the sounds of Maxie's leather slippers on the stairs. Her tea kettle was filled with empty silence. At 9 o'clock, the mailman came with the Daily Mail. He had a seed catalog for Maxie, and he waited for her to come down the stairs. Since she didn't come, and this was most unusual, he decided to deliver the catalog to her door. He climbed the 4 flights of stairs. He knocked and waited. There was no sign of Maxie. At 9:03, Mr. Turkle, who lived on the 3rd floor, came hurrying up the stairs. At 9:05, Mr. and Mrs. Morehouse got there from across the street. At 9:07, Mrs. Trueheart came over from next door. Susie Smith came up at 9:10 with her twin brothers. Five members of the family on the 2nd floor made it up by 9:13. Then came Arthur, the superintendent. By 9:17, there were 17 people, 3 dogs, and 2 cats, all waiting for Maxie to open the door. And when she didn't, they all went in. They found Maxie in bed. More people came up the stairs, and someone called a doctor. By the time he got there, there were 42 grown-ups and 11 children in Maxie's small living room. When the doctor came out of Maxie's bedroom, he shook his head sadly. "Maxie isn't really sick," he said. "She's lonely. She doesn't feel loved. She doesn't feel that anyone needs her." No one said anything for a minute. Then suddenly Mrs. Trueheart got up and walked right past the doctor and into the bedroom. "Maxie," she shouted angrily, "you let me down. You and that warbling bird let me down." "Every morning when I wake up and I hear that bird, then it's my job to wake my husband. He has the morning shift at the corner diner, and he's still asleep. Why, there must be at least 75 people at that diner right now waiting for their breakfasts. They'll all have to go to work on empty stomachs, all because of you and that yellow bird." "The school bus never came this morning," said Mr. Turkle, who drove the bus. "I didn't wake up in time. I never heard Sarah Sharp's footsteps on my ceiling." Sarah Sharp was a nurse who lived just above Mr. Turkle. There were a lot of people waiting for her right now at the hospital. She always got up when she heard Maxie's door squeak. Mr. and Mrs. Morehouse both had very important jobs, but they had missed their train that morning. Their alarm clock was Maxie's window shade. Arthur said he hadn't swept the front steps that morning. He overslept because Maxie didn't ring his bell. He hoped no one would complain. They all talked about it and decided that there must be about 400 people who needed Maxie, or who needed someone else who needed Maxie, every morning. Maxie smiled. She got out of bed and made a pot of tea. In fact, she made 5 pots of tea. Each time the kettle whistled, dogs howled, cats whined, and babies bawled. Maxie listened and thought about how many people were being touched by these sounds, her sounds. By 9:45 that morning, Maxie had served tea to everybody, and she was so pleased. I hope you enjoyed Maxie's story. Please think of ways your even small gestures affect others, and let others know when they have brought some joy to your days. Thank you for joining me. See you next time.